Thank you, everybody. One of the things that we're here to do realistically is to follow up on a paper that we took to the Strategic Directors Leadership Team here at the County Council. And that was a paper in relation to energy security that hopefully most of you will have seen. It was sent out. If you haven't seen it, if you let me know, I can arrange to let you have that. But the idea realistically of the seminar is to raise awareness and to stimulate some discussion around the general issues around energy security and what that may mean for us. The piece of work started off very much focused upon what it means for the County Council, but we soon recognised that this isn't a County Council problem. This is a much wider issue than that, and that's why we opened the invitation to partners, and that's why we're particularly pleased to see representatives of partner organisations here today. In the remaining hour and 15 minutes, we aim to get through a brief context of energy security. What does it mean? Some discussion about peak oil, while we're particularly pleased to have with us Simon Snowden from Liverpool University, who's an expert in this area. And then a short plenary session where we'd hope to try and have some discussion about, well, what does it mean for us? And potentially, where can that take us moving forward? I will have to refer to my notes because, unlike Martin, I'm not an expert on this. And so one of the issues that we really wanted to look at, realistically, was what does it mean? What does UK energy security cause for us? My role here at the County Council is I've got responsibility for energy management. So I'm responsible for making sure that we're making best and most efficient use of our energy by bringing down overall costs, reducing carbon emissions, but keeping a weather eye on what's happening outside in the wider world. I've also got responsible for developing a renewable energy strategy. But one of the biggest things that's out there is about, well, where's the energy going to come from in the first place? As Martin has mentioned, we've seen the issues in the Gulf of Mexico. We know what's happened to North Sea oil and our own local reserves, but it's a much wider issue than that, and that's why we need to look at this in the round, realistically. The context, though, is that electricity, it's difficult to do a presentation on energy security when you can't say electricity, but electricity and power generation will drop by around about 30% by 2018. That nuclear stations, I know it's a politically sensitive issue, but generally it is accepted that they're reaching the end of their life, and that coal plants do have some particular issues in relation to environmental standards. The national grid and distribution networks are struggling, and Ofgem recently, in a 2010 report, identified that by 2020, we'd need to have a £200 billion investment in energy infrastructure if we were going to cope with a 60% increase in electricity costs. There have been warnings from the energy industry about the capacity issues that exist and whether we will be faced with blackouts or voltage reductions from 2015 moving forward. And so obviously there are quite some significant issues that are absolutely outside the control of our own organisations, much wider than that. It's a big, significant issue that is actually reaching some national significance and some international significance. And what we really want to do here is look at, well, what does it mean for us and what can we do? In relation to energy security, this slide shows the mix of fuels we get from our electricity that we had in 2009 and how that's proposed to get how we'll get our energy in 2020. It's from the UK Low Carbon Transition Plan that hopefully many of you will be aware of and will have seen. And it's big rises and falls in where it's suggested that our energy will come from in a relatively short period. 11 years in terms of a major infrastructure issue such as energy is a very short period, and you could see for yourselves the differences between where some of those things are going to come. Renewables particularly, and gas particularly, some very large differences. Key points from the slide, realistically, are gas use, is that it largely following the decline in North Sea gas reserves, and the fact that that in particular has a very significant security issue in terms of where our gas comes from. Simon will undoubtedly touch on this in far greater depth than I will. And that coal use is proposed to be reducing, which is a good thing, realistically, in relation to CO2 emissions, because coal-fired gas, unfortunately, is one of the highest emitters of CO2 emissions. Where we are, though, is obviously looking at this, particularly in relation to renewables, and members who attended some seminars that we did earlier on in the year will know that the County Council has been looking at that issue. But renewables are moving higher up the scale of issues, particularly in relation to reducing our carbon emissions, but particularly in relation to what we're talking about today, to try to meet the gap that will exist in relation to where our energy is going to come from moving into the future. We do have some significant issues in terms of deliverability. So whilst we've got the overall infrastructure mix that we've got, there are some changes that will come forward that will either help or cause some difficulties in relation to how we move forward. We've got changes to the planning system, particularly as a result of the recent election. There's been a further change in relation to the fact that the new government has suggested the Infrastructure Planning Commission that was going to be established to make some of the major planning decisions on infrastructure matters such as energy, to get them through in a, try not to be too controversial, try to get them through in a more streamlined fashion would be their view. The understanding is that that's probably not going to survive the change of government. So, you know, it is quite a moving market. We've got Ofgem. Well, at the moment we've got Ofgem. Again, whether Ofgem survives the change in government, but that was set up to regulate the markets to ensure competitiveness and keeping prices low for consumers. But again, a change in emphasis. The emphasis is now moving slightly away from ensuring price stability to actually tackling and considering the fundamental issue of, is there going to be enough energy in the first place? There's a big debate, realistically, about how government will relate to the energy industry, and I think we are in a relative state of flux, to be honest, considering the change of government that's existed quite quickly. Those of you who may or may not be aware, as part of the Liberal Democratic and Conservative coalition, Liberal Democrat is now the Minister in charge at the Department for Energy and Climate Change. So we wait to see what sort of issues that dynamic may bring in relation to the overall strand and the overall impact that the WCC might be taking forward. We're in uncharted waters, I think, in relation to the politics going on nationally at this stage. The next slide just hopefully gives us a little bit of information about where we get our energy from. And as you can see, we hit our UK natural gas peaks in 2000 and have been slowly reducing from then. And it's suggested that by 2020 we will be 65% reliant on imports. That's based upon the fact that we'll have got to the position that the low carbon transition plan will have actually got there by now, and I can see people in the room shaking their heads at that, and yeah, we can talk about that when we get to the end.